Our guest today is a self-described Tesla Uber bull. He's invested all in on Tesla for many years now and has been consistent in his bullish forecast. But now he's come out with his latest updated forecast, and you might be very shocked. His price target for Tesla stock by 2032, 300 times what it is today. That would get Tesla's market cap to 300 trillion. Is he wrong? He'll ask you to not just react to the crazy large number, but instead tell him what part of his analysis is wrong. Warren Redlich is a criminal defense lawyer with a YouTube channel called Warren Redlich, and is one of the few people that Elon Musk himself follows on X. Welcome back, Warren. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Love it. We do this. We've been doing it quite regularly. I don't know, every 2-3 months. But, you've always had big forecasts. You've always been one of the Uber bulls, very consistent, which I really appreciate. Somebody who's stuck with his guns despite the tremendous fall and everybody calling you crazy. Now it's the opposite. Well, it's not the opposite. It's like people are much more bullish now and they can see why they're bullish. But now they're saying, oh my God, 300 trillion. So walk us through your deck.
They're saying that even at 100 trillion. It doesn't matter whether you say 100 trillion, 300 trillion.
Some people said 75 times is good.
Even 75 trillion, I got people critical. So
okay, let's walk us through. And what you're saying is, look, you've got the analysis, and people tell him where he's wrong. If he's being over bullish or his calculation is wrong, please tell us. But he's just walking us through. So thank you, Martin. Appreciate this. Let's go.
Okay,
let's go.
Yeah, so I presented this to a group of Thai investors in Bangkok. There's a YouTuber, and he's on X also, KP Trader. And he's a very influential social media personality, and his group is very influential in Thailand. They have like almost 500,000 subs on YouTube, and they had to put together this great event at the Royal Bangkok Sports Club. And he asked me to present. He's a friend of mine. He's a great guy. He's a TESLA Investor Club guy, and introduced me to a lot of people. And he invited me to come speak at this group, and it was a great event. So I'm going to be posting the video of that soon.
Sounds good.
So, Elon said, and not just Elon, this is one of those things, Elon says stuff and you say, okay, it's Elon time. But when the rest of the team says something as well, then it's more credible. And I think it was Ashok and maybe at least one other person said they're going to start an unsupervised robo-taxi network in Texas and California, late 2025. Assume they're being over optimistic and say it's going to be early 2026 or mid 2026. To me, if you push the timeline back a year on my numbers or 2 years, it doesn't really matter. So I think we're expecting that this robo-taxi network that starts in Austin, let's say, or Texas and California will be mostly Model Ys and Model 3s. There may be some S's and X's in it. There may be a Cybertruck or two in it. But I think the idea is relatively low volume, maybe be 1,000 cars in each place. Mm-hmm. And prove, and we don't know this, they haven't said this, but that's my gut, is let's do it in low volume. Let's prove the concept works. Let's get a demonstration going, and then they'll expand as it improves. Yeah.
Totally agree. I don't think, in fact, you obviously even said 2026. So I think most of us agreeing late 2025, all this. Perfect. Okay.
And then if you go to the next slide. So one of the things that people focus on, and one of the criticisms I get, okay, is how big is the Uber Lyft taxi market?
Right.
Right. And so I think it starts with the Uber, Lyft, and taxi market, which currently costs in the ballpark of $3 a mile in the US. Mm-hmm. And I have Thai numbers on this slide just to explain it to Thai people. That's 65 baht per kilometer. So in the United States and in most wealthy countries, the most expensive part of the cost is the human driver. This is not true in Thailand, the Philippines, Malaysia, and other countries that are emerging economies. U.S. owners spend about 70 cents a mile on their car. That's from ARK Invest, and I think there's other sources for that, but in the ballpark of 70 cents a mile. Initially, what I expect is that robo-taxi will replace Uber, Lyft, and taxi, that they will be able to undercut the price of Uber, Lyft, and taxi rides, maybe $2.50 a mile, maybe $1 a mile. Once they get down to $2 a mile, they basically replace all, as long as they have the supply for it, as long as they have enough cars, robo-taxis in the network, they basically replace all of Uber and Lyft and taxis. And I think Uber has a market cap of like $150 billion, and I'm just scratching my head saying they have zero business in 3 years. So I don't understand how that's possible, but it is what it is. And we may talk about this later. Lyft's market cap is $6 billion, which is less crazy. So at $2 a mile, at $1.50 a mile, you wipe out Uber, Lyft, and taxi rides in wealthy countries because it's cheaper than having a human driver. as you expand the number of vehicles, you're able to bring the price down. People say, well, Tesla should sell rides for 50 cents a mile. Well, if you priced it at 50 cents a mile, demand would be too high for supply, and people would wait an hour for a ride. You have to gradually adjust the pricing down as you expand your supply, as demand matches your supply. And as you get down close to $1 a mile, 70 cents a mile, most people who own cars will switch to not owning a car and riding robo-taxis instead. And I get some pushback on that point. But let's start with, you got 2 DUIs on the record and you got bad credit. And you drive a BMW 5 Series and you do 10,000 miles a year. Your cost per mile is probably $1.50 a mile. So getting the price down to $1 a mile, all of a sudden you're already saving a lot of money. And as you get to people with lower and lower cost per mile, the guy who's driving a 10-year-old I don't know, Ford Crown. I don't know if the Ford Crown Victoria still exists, but a 10-year-old Ford that's fully paid for, and the insurance is cheap because he doesn't bother with anything but liability insurance, and he drives 25,000 miles a year. That guy's got a low cost per mile. But that segment of the market is fairly small. The vast majority of people are paying 60, 70, 80 cents a mile. So as you bring the price down, you're saving them money by letting them switch. And something that people don't count very much is you're saving them time. If you actually spent 30 minutes thinking about how much time do I spend each year on having a car, on shopping for car insurance, on shopping for tires, on shopping for windshield wipers, on going to gas stations. If you own an electric vehicle, of course, you charge at home, but there's moments where you have to go do something for your car, buying a car, selling a car. I think it's in the ballpark of 20 hours a year that people spend getting a car wash, whatever it is. I think people spend on average somewhere in the ballpark of 20 hours a year. So I'm saving you 20 hours a year, and let's say I'm saving you $2,000 a year. Now, if you're wealthy, maybe you suck it up and you don't care and you really want to have your own car. But the bulk of people who own cars are working class, middle class people for whom saving $2,000 a year and 20 hours a year really matters. And they're going to switch. And maybe I'm wrong. I think I'm right and some people won't switch because they really like having a car. But the more and more people switch, the more and more other car companies go out of business because there's no demand anymore. And then costs go up because the economies of scale get shot on every other car. And the bright spot, by the way, about that, people with 2 DUIs and bad credit switching over, is you're making the road safer by taking those people off the road first. Mm-hmm. Teenage drivers have very high insurance rates. Why? Because they crash a lot. So taking teenage drivers off the road. If you have a 5-year-old now, they're never going to get a driver's license. There's no point in getting a driver's license.
Okay, so far, everything you said, totally on board with it. I think there's only a few real analysts out there who doesn't agree that the market for robotaxis is limited to just the Uber and Lyft market, the ride-hail market. That actually, if you undercut those guys, this goes beyond that. And you've described the number of segments that would switch over. So I think so far we agree. Just a matter of the size and when. Yeah.
Right. And how long does it take to First, you have to deliver enough robo-taxi rides to displace all of Uber, Lyft, and taxis.
Right.
Then you start picking off the high-cost drivers, right? And then as you go down in price, the market really, really grows, and you have to make a lot more robo-taxis. So it's a long slog, and you got to get to my number is 10 million by 2030, right? 10 million robo-taxis by 2030, and 100 million
globally. Yeah.
Yes. It's going to be wealthy countries. So like in Thailand, the human driver is so cheap. Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines, and Vietnam, and several other countries. I'm used to Southeast Asia, right? The human driver is so cheap that I don't see robo-taxi being competitive until you do something like my crazy pod car idea, which is a video for another day.
All right, wait. So 10 million, that's actually very doable. If you're talking, because does that include existing Model 3s, Model Ys, we're already at 7 million. Now, of course, not everybody's going to put their car to robotaxi, but if you include that plus all new cars, or is this cybercabs?
The model I'm going through here is an abstraction. It's napkin math. It's like, let's suppose Tesla has 10 million robotaxis of its own, and everything else is we ignore everything else. Not to say that everything else isn't there, but let's just say, what would that be worth?
Okay.
And the reason we do that is because it swamps everything else, and everything else becomes trivial.
Sure.
Everything else becomes.
And if you just do 2 million per year, well, that's a big stretch. But let's say they're making 2 million robotaxis per year, then 5 years you get to 10 million.
So don't forget that they're making 2 million vehicles a year already.
That's right. That's my point.
They could bring the Model 3 and Y in, and now they're making 2 million cybercabs a year.
Yeah, exactly.
In 2027, 2028, it doesn't take you very long to get to 10 million robo-taxis. And again, push it back to 2031, who cares? Exactly. So, and a critical thing that people push back on is, well, you know, my cost per mile isn't that high or whatever. The cost per mile of owning a car isn't that high. So it's the third line from the bottom, high usage amortization. If you have a $20,000, if it costs Tesla $20,000 to make a cybercab, and they expect to get 500,000 miles out of it, the cost of the vehicle over the miles driven is a lot less than you buying a Model Y and or a gas car, whatever it is, for $40,000 and driving it 100,000 miles for the life that you own it. The cost of the vehicle per mile is much higher in the scenario where you own the car and you drive 15,000 miles a year than it is when Tesla produces a car for half that much, doesn't have any costs associated with selling it because they sell it to themselves, and they drive it for 100,000 miles a year. The amortization is a much lower cost. Electricity is a lower cost per mile, which, you know, that's when you own your own electric vehicle, your electricity cost is also low, but Tesla will probably in its own operations have a lower cost per mile because they'll deploy solar at mass scale too. I mentioned so the human driver cost is lower in less wealthy countries. I think robo-taxis will hit wealthy countries first. And that's a longer conversation we can talk about later. So please go to the next slide. I agree with you there.
Okay.
So they've told us Tesla will begin manufacturing Cybercab in 2026. I think they said the cost per paid mile is going to be roughly 30 cents. I think that's pessimistic, but we'll call it in the ballpark. If in the past, Elon said it was 18 cents a mile for a Model 3 back in 2018, 2019. Cybercab should be much less expensive. I think they didn't, in my opinion, and of course I know they know better than I do. It's my gut reaction, I'd say, is I think they could have pushed harder for lower cost, more efficiency, lower cost per mile, but I think they know what they're doing better than I do. It's just my gut reaction is I wanted to see lower cost per paid mile. And maybe they have another vehicle coming in the future in their product roadmap for 2028 or 2029 that does that. So ballpark, if Tesla starts ramping production in 2026, I think this might be conservative. They have 100,000 Tesla-owned Cybercabs by 2027.
Yeah, definitely conservative. I mean, we're about, 70,000, 60,000 Cybercabs, Cybertrucks this year. So why not 100,000 Cybercabs by 2027?
They have said that they expect
second year.
They have said they expect to fully ramp the Cybercab factory in a year.
In 2026. He says scale.
Because of the simplicity of manufacturing Cybercab, it's got half the part count. They said it's utilitarian. There's a lot of things about it that make it easier to manufacture. So they believe where it typically takes 18 months to ramp a vehicle like Model Y, they think they'll be able to ramp Cybercab in 12 months. Yeah. So if they're going to ramp a million vehicle a year factory in 12 months, then 100,000 Cybercabs is easy by 2027.
Okay.
So the essence of the model, the napkin math is here. If you assume a gross profit of $1 per paid mile, which I think is low in the early days, if you're selling rides for $2 a mile and your cost is 30 cents a paid mile, you're at $1.70 a paid mile in gross profit per vehicle. So at 60,000 paid miles, $1 per paid mile in gross profit, you're doing $60,000 per profit per vehicle. And that's in like 2027, $66 billion in Tesla gross profit. Now, Tesla gross profit this year is going to be in the ballpark of 20 billion. That's 3 years running. They sort of been around 20 billion for the last 3 years. And, we're expecting them to break out next year. Besides Robotaxi, we're expecting to break out and go a little higher next year. But 6 billion in gross profit on top of the existing 20 billion is pretty darn good. So please go to the next slide. This is where we start to have fun.
Well, so first of all, the confusing part is Elon did say that we're going to sell the car, but also charge a transaction fee. We might do both. If they sell the car, it sounds like he was just saying, it costs us 30,000, 20,000. We'll sell for 30,000. It doesn't sound right, but there might be a subscription. 60,000 per vehicle sounds like what Søren Basher is also tracking in the future.
I don't see a lot of private buyers. I don't think the market. Just look around. How many 2-seat cars sell? Right? It's not.
If it's a 2-seat car for Robotaxi, though, then your fleet managers,
I see fleet managers buying it. Yes, I'm saying people are saying I want to buy a Cybercab for home. Well, for my own personal use, I think that's a very small market.
Yeah, agreed.
I don't see that being a game changer for the business. But if you're making $1 million a year and you're only deploying, the first couple of years you're only deploying, 100,000 in your robotaxi network as you're scaling your robotaxi network, you got a lot of excess production. Maybe you sell them to other people, but I think that there's going to be a challenge of scaling production while you're getting approval for your network. You got to get the network going and get approval and get it to scale and get customer acceptance. But I just don't see. Look around. What's the best-selling two-seat car in the world?
Right. No, there is.
I can't name one.
No.
I like off the top of my head, I can't think of one.
Yeah.
I could see people in Thailand making this a three-seater, and then if Thailand, they're like put seats in the back. They'll put seats in the back, and you'll have 3 people sitting in the front, and you'll have 6 people sitting in the back.
Oh, we used to do it in the 70s. Okay.
It's going to happen. I'm telling you, it's going to happen in Thailand. Mm-hmm. It's a Subaru Brat. Think of it as a Subaru Brat. So get to 2030. And these are ballpark numbers. This is napkin math, but let's suppose this is where you start to have fun. Tesla owns a fleet of 10 million Cybercabs. They're deployed across most of the US. I think there will be states that resist. I think Michigan will resist, New York will resist, Massachusetts will resist. But more than half the states will go on board, and the largest states will be on board. California, Texas, and Florida will be on board. Most of the southern tier of the country will be on board. So you'll see deployment across much of the US. Some other countries will adopt. By 2030, I think China will probably adopt, even though their human drivers aren't that expensive. But still, I think China wants this kind of thing happening. But simply, if you just say, all right, let's suppose Tesla owns 10 million vehicles, just picking round numbers. And let's suppose the prices come down enough that they're only making 40,000 a year in gross profit. I think they're still making 60,000 a year in gross profit per vehicle at this point. But let's suppose they're only making 40. So now you have $400 billion in gross profit for Tesla in 2030, right? Which is 20x the gross profit at the current gross profit. And that doesn't include Tesla Energy, doesn't include everything else that's growing in Tesla. And you're already at a 20x in terms of what is the company doing? And you're growing faster than we are now, right? We haven't really been growing very fast in the last couple of years. So all of a sudden you have really rapid growth because we're at 10 million vehicles. You'll see where we're going on the next slide, right? But it's pretty easy to forecast where we're heading once you get here. So the PE ratio might actually go up because of the scale that's visible in the future. But ballpark $400 billion in gross profit, that's ballpark a 20x on the current stock price, so you're talking about $7,000 a share.
All right, let me a couple pushbacks. One is Elon himself had said that robotaxi will take Tesla to a $5 trillion company, which is 5x what it is now. You're saying robotaxi will take me to a 20x.
I'm saying much larger than that, yeah. But
no, I know, but I'm saying to you, this is Elon himself said this. And then secondly, does this in any way matter if there's competition or not?
Sure. So as far as Elon goes, I think that we don't know what's in Elon's head. And I'll say this, if we only get a 5x, I'm not going to cry. Right?
No, I know. I'm just pushing back on the 20x.
I'm already set for life, but that's not first principles thinking, right? Elon says a lot of stuff. When they first came out with the Model 3, Elon said it would be a $35,000 price. Is it? Has it ever been? I think, there's been brief moments when there was a $35,000 Model 3. I think Elon says a lot of things. And the simple question is, okay, this is where we get to this question. What part of my analysis is wrong? Do you think we're likely to get to 10 million vehicles in the fleet? He did say that at the Autonomy Day, that they would have a fleet of 10 million vehicles.
The part that could be wrong is the 40,000 per year. Again, when you build it up, it makes sense. But it's also, maybe tell me, it's a possible thing that Tesla does not actually want to charge that much. If their goal is sustainable energy, they want to just make a little bit money. They don't want to make more. Maybe they did.
You can't charge too little because then demand outstrips supply. The lower you make the price, the more you increase demand. And if you only have 10 million robotaxis and the world has 2 billion vehicles, let's say they replace 5x the number of vehicles that you've got. So they're replacing 50 million vehicles. You're not even making a dent in the global vehicle market. So does this
take into account the share that the Tesla, the fleet managers would take? because
Well,
Sir Ambassador gives them a 60, 70% and then a 70% of the take, and then Tesla only takes 30% of the take, right?
there's a business question about what's Tesla's game plan, right? Is Tesla's game plan to be predominantly a ride seller, or is Tesla's game plan to be predominantly a vehicle seller and network provider, right? So, and then what percentage of the rest of the network do they take? Now, look, my number doesn't really matter. I don't think $40,000 a year gross profit is a lot, even if there's double that number of vehicles. Even if the fleet managers or people like us have another 10 million vehicles out there, I still think this price point is low. I still think the ride, this is rides at less than $1 a mile. To get to 40,000 a year gross profit, you're talking about rides that are costing less than $1 a mile. And I think demand at less than $1 a mile is really, really high. And we left out, by the way, not only replacing privately owned vehicles, but at a certain point, you're replacing mass transit. Like if you know New York City like I do, it's almost $3 for a ride on a subway or a bus. Well, the subway or a bus is inconvenient. It's often smelly, or there's urine on the seats, or there's a homeless guy who's threatening or whatever. The Daniel Penny trial just happened, right? Yeah. And then if you're going 5 miles, which is I think more than a typical subway ride, this is going to cost you about the same. Right? This is going to cost you about the same as a subway ride, and it's a hell of a lot more convenient and comfortable and pleasant and safe. So, you're going to start getting, and if you have I think the typical subway ride is like 2 or 3 miles. So at 3 miles, you're the same price as an MTA fare, and it's a lot more convenient.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So
you start taking away mass transit business as well. The market is very, very large. If you start to look at, as you lower the price point, how much of the business of the rest of the world you take.
Agreed. Yeah. Okay.
So this is where it gets insane, if it wasn't already. This is where it starts to get insane because it gets worse. I see Tesla owning a fleet of 100 million cybercabs. Now, it may be that a lot of people say it doesn't make sense for Tesla to own all these vehicles and do that. It makes sense for Tesla to sell to fleet managers. If you do the fleet manager math and you say Tesla gets 50% of the ride price and now has none of the cost, well, gross profit's about the same per vehicle when they don't have to own the vehicle. I'm not saying that, what's their share of the ride, of the revenue from the ride if you do fleet managers. It may be that Tesla's still making very, very substantial profits from the fleet manager story, but this is just to keep things simple. This is the napkin math if Tesla owns 100 million cybercabs, and they only make $20,000 in profit per year each, which is pretty low. That you're talking about ride prices now like 50 cents a mile, and you've basically expanded to the vast majority of people in wealthy countries don't own cars, right? And now you're at $2 trillion in Tesla's gross profit. That's 100x, right? That's 100x, and 100x. Now we're at our $100 trillion market cap. And look, you can say Warren PE ratio wouldn't be that high anymore. Well, when you see the Optimus story that's coming next, the PE ratio is still going to be high. So you're at $100 trillion market cap. Again, this doesn't include Tesla Energy. This doesn't include whatever cars you do sell. It doesn't include AI training as a service. It doesn't include, who knows, they're going to have a drone business. There's all kinds of things that may be coming out of Tesla that we don't see coming. So just on this alone, $2 trillion in gross profit, 100x on where we are today, and 100x on the share price is a $100 trillion market cap. And it's $35,000 share price.
Mm-hmm. I guess the only thing is you also said by 2032, that's 300x. And so 100 million? No, it's not going to happen by 2032.
I don't think in my I think the thumbnail for the video said 100 million. But let's take a step back. It doesn't have to be that you have the 100 million cybercabs in 2032 to get the valuation that goes with it. It has to be that investors see it's coming.
It depends on what your PE, but okay, let's.
Now imagine you're Tesla, okay, and you've got your first cybercab factory, and you're making insane amounts of money, and the cash is pouring in.
Yeah.
What do you do with the money? Well, the cost of building another cybercab factory is less than half the cost of building our own factories, and we're producing twice as many vehicles out of them, and they're generating 10 times as much profit per vehicle. Maybe we should build more cybercab factories.
Yeah.
I think that if you look at, there's been some photos and video recently. I think it's just photos recently of the Megapack factory in Shanghai, which is just down the road from the Shanghai Gigafactory. That factory is way too big for Megapacks. They're building. I'm convinced they're going to build Cybercab there. We know they got approval to build Cybercab in Berlin.
Interesting.
We know they got approval to build
Interesting.
500,000 more vehicles in Berlin. That's probably going to be Cybercab. We know they got the spot in Mexico. It's really not, and that one's going to be a really big factory, right? So it's seen now. Maybe Trump puts tariffs on Mexico, and the Mexico factory doesn't go through. But I think the Cybercab business is viable in most of Latin America. In Mexico, Mexico's a reasonably wealthy country by standards of, much wealthier than here in Thailand or the Philippines, right? I think Brazil is better off than Thailand. I don't know what Brazil's economy is like, but I think that a lot of Latin American countries are more comparable to Mexico than they are to Thailand. So I think there's potential for Latin American Cybercab to do really well if they open up robotaxi in other countries in Latin America. So it's easy to see Cybercabs in Europe. It's easy to see Cybercabs in China. It's easy to see Cybercabs. Now, certain countries, there's going to be resistance, like the taxi lobby is strong in Japan. The taxi mafia, they're called in parts of India, is insanely strong. I don't think it breaks into India anyway. But I mean, there's going to be resistance. But, once consumers experience it, once voters experience it, they're going to say, why don't we have this here? And it's going to become overwhelming. So,
yeah. First time I've ever heard that theory. I love it. That Megapack factory in China could be, they could already be making Cybercabs there. Interesting. I'm still going to lean towards that it's a Megapack factory because it is 3 times the size of Lathrop, but Megapack itself is friggin' big business, and China wants Megapacks, and China will need Megapacks and all that, and Elon will need more Megapacks, and so
they can build a Cybercab factory somewhere else. They may be room in Giga Shanghai for Cybercab. We don't know.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. This is fun so far. So this is how you come up with your 100x potential if you get to 100 million Cybercabs at some point in the future. Okay.
Yeah, and it could be that the fleet managers own Cybercabs and Tesla's getting a percentage. This is to deliver an overly simple story. You don't have to go with the overly simple story, and then you go to the next level and you say, we're just getting started. Optimus is next.
Yeah.
So the simple math on Optimus is, and I worked at Burger King and Dairy Queen when I was a kid, so I see this from my own experience a long time ago, but I still remember. I remember more about it than a certain presidential candidate remembers about her time at McDonald's. I'll say that.
Yeah.
So in general, U.S. low-wage jobs like that are in the ballpark of $20 an hour. And you can say, well, it doesn't pay $20 an hour, but when you consider cost to the employer of things like employment compensation, compliance, whatever, management costs, it's in the ballpark of $20 an hour.
Yep.
And I think in California, they're paying $25 an hour. I think Wawa in a lot of places paying $20 an hour. There's a lot of companies that are doing low-wage jobs that are still paying in the ballpark of $20 an hour. So if you imagine a business like a McDonald's or a Wawa, and let's say they have 2 shifts, I think Wawa has 3, but let's say they have 2 shifts. And imagine you have 10 employees on a shift, and Optimus isn't yet capable of replacing one single employee, but it does enough work that management figures out we can get by with 9 workers now instead of 10. In other words, it's not that it's doing all the tasks that one guy does. It just does enough tasks that the other 9 people can take up whatever's left. So if Optimus effectively replaces 1 worker for 2 shifts, you're talking about 4,000 hours a year times $20. It's $80,000 a year. Again, simple napkin math. You could say it works 5,000 hours a year. You could say it works 3,000 hours a year. But simple napkin math, you get to $80,000 a year. And if you say Optimus is going to last 10 years, and this is leaving out that Optimus increases in value over time as you update the software.
Yeah.
Right. Leaving that out, which we think is likely, you're developing $800,000 in value over a 10-year life. And the build cost is really going to be about $10,000 a unit. The bot weighs about 125 pounds or 50 kilograms, something like that. A Tesla Model 3 weighs about 4,000 pounds or about 1,800 kilograms, something like that. I'm getting my numbers off, but in the ballpark. There's so much less material that goes in. Once you build it at scale, it's the cost of the atoms plus a little bit of process. And the more you get to scale, the lower the cost comes. So I think the build cost is going to be $10,000 at scale or less. So if you sold the bots for $110,000, remember the buyer is getting $800,000 in value. So I think this is very conservative. And you can say, well, wait a minute, they're not going to sell bots, they're going to lease them. All I'm saying is for every bot that you make, you're going to book effectively $100,000 or $110,000 in profit. Whether it's you sell the bot
lifetime.
In its lifetime. whether you sell the bot for $110,000 up front, you never get any revenue from it, or you don't sell it at all and you lease it out and you get revenue that way, or you sell it for $60,000 and then you get software revenue. I don't care how you slice it. Just to come up with a simple number, if you say it's $100,000 profit per bot and you produce 10 million bots a year, you're at $1 trillion in gross profit on bot. And again, you're just getting started. Mm-hmm. So that's $1 trillion in gross profit on top of the $2 trillion from Robotaxi. And you're probably at this $1 trillion in gross profit to 10 million bots a year, I think, before 2030. I think they start manufacturing bots at some scale in 10 million a year, maybe. I think you start manufacturing bots at some scale in 2026, and you start manufacturing a larger scale with the Gen 2 bot in let's say there's a first manufactured generation of bot that's coming.
That's
this
one. Version
2025. That's manufactured for Tesla alone. Then sometime in 2026, they start manufacturing a bot for customers like Frito-Lay and Pepsi, who are the early customers for Pepsi. So they get some external customers and they start manufacturing bots for them, doing warehouse work, doing simple work, whatever. It's probably 2029 when you start manufacturing at scale for large scale customers. And once you're doing it, getting to 10 million a year, and this may push it to 2031 or whatever, but I think it's before 2032 that you got 10 million bots a year, you got another $1 trillion in gross profit, and now if you follow the math we did before, you're at $150 trillion market cap. It's 150x. And let's go to the next slide because that's where it gets really fun. Unless you have a question about this.
I don't. It's all about timing. But the 10 million bots per year is actually very achievable. And the reason is, like you said earlier, right? For every car that you make, it's actually 1/30th the weight and size and all that. At some point, you can make 30 bots for every car. But let's say it's just 10 to 1. Let's say it's 10 to 1. Well, the first year is 100,000 cars you can make in the first year. Well, 100,000 10 is 1 million cars in that first year. Then you can kind of like every year you can double it, is what almost all of them have said. All the CEOs of robotic companies have asked. They said once it's basically keep adding a zero for every year.
Yeah. Well, then the other thing is what they talked about with Cybercab is
10x.
The factory footprint is half the size and the output is twice the volume. Well, what's the factory footprint for Optimus?
Yeah, exactly.
There's no paint shop. No. The battery pack is 2.3 kilowatt hours instead of 75 kilowatt hours.
Yeah.
It's a much smaller thing. You don't need really, really heavy duty objects to move it from station to station. Like the factory footprint of Optimus is going to be.
It's closer to the cell phone, the mobile phone. Many of them have said this already.
Yeah, the factory footprint is going to be a quarter the size. So the cost of building your Optimus factory, again, once you nail down, and this is our manufacturing model, the cost, are they going to use unboxed process for building Optimus? I don't know how they're going to figure that out.
But you don't need industrial robots like you do, because every part of a bot is it's low weight enough that it can easily be moved around, stored, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So I think it's easier to ramp production in high volume. It's easier to say, okay, we've got the factory we want. Now let's build 10 more of these factories.
Yes.
You've got this massive cash pile coming in. Your cost of building factories is small, and you're great. So now long term, this is where if it wasn't crazy enough, okay, long term you say Optimus training. Well, first of all, it seems very likely that Optimus training, as you develop your AI, the training will increase the capabilities and the dollars per hour that work it replaces will go up. Mm-hmm. Right? It's going to start doing higher value work. One of my favorite examples, by the way, is roofing work. Roofing work is very unpleasant. I don't know how much roofers make, but I think they make more than McDonald's workers. It's dangerous. The cost of insurance for the worker getting injured is very high for that kind of work. So, and by the way, this doesn't necessarily reduce human jobs. Can I just make a pitch for this point? I posted this recently, but people say it's going to destroy human jobs. All right, let's imagine your typical roofing. So let's say you're going to put solar panels on a roof. And the typical job, you have 10 people working on that roof. And you say, we're going to use Optimus. I think we'll actually have a specialized roofing install robot in the future that's more designed for it. But let's just suppose it was Optimus. And you have 5 Optimus on the roof instead of and then 5 humans, right? I think your cost, and let's say it's $50,000 to install the roof the old way, the solar cells the old way, and now you've reduced the cost to $30,000. The thing is, the demand 5x's if you lower the price of that roof.
Yep.
So now you have 5 times as many crews working. So
Yeah.
you've replaced half your workers with robots, but you've 5x the number of crews. So you actually go from 10 workers to 25.
Yep.
And that more of them are working on the ground. You've made it safer. You've made it less unpleasant. So this makes life better. I think there are circumstances where robots will do all the work and there'll be no humans. But I think there's a lot of circumstances, especially in the run-up as Optimus is being developed, as humanoid robots are being developed, where there might be a lot more jobs. And it may be hard to find the human labor to supervise the bots. Bot herder. I think the job is bot herder.
I agree with you. I've been saying that for a while as well.
So at this point, Tesla's making 100 million bots a year. And again, this isn't 2032. This is what we can see from 2032. Not just what we can see. We see it now. But the broader market sees this in 2032, and they assign a valuation that fits with where they think this is going.
Yeah.
So Tesla's making So Tesla's making 100 million robots a year. That's at least $10 trillion a year in gross profit. That's 500x recent gross profit. So when I said 350x or 300x, I was actually understating what I think it's going to be. So it may be a $500 trillion market cap, and the growth is still there. There's sort of unlimited work to be done. So the value in less wealthy countries, just keep in mind the value in less wealthy countries is lower. $20 an hour in America, $10 a day in Thailand, minimum wage, right? And I think there's a consequence of this that people are not taking into account. Getting away from the crazy valuation question, I think it's likely that wealthy countries will adopt these technologies first, robotaxi and humanoid robots, and productivity will increase rapidly in wealthy countries first. And GDP and quality of life and abundance will increase in wealthy. We already have abundant lives in wealthy countries, and that will increase. And the divide, we call it the digital divide. Now the AI divide is going to rapidly increase between wealth. And we just had Jensen Huang just spoke like yesterday, day before yesterday, in Bangkok to a group about how they're NVIDIA is working really hard to deploy in Thailand. They've got partnerships with 40 universities. There's a lot of efforts to get AI going in Thailand, but fundamentally you still have this problem that the cost of human labor is so cheap that it's going to be a while, in my opinion, before AI becomes meaningfully valuable. In real world AI becomes meaningfully valuable. Now maybe ChatGPT value, the large language model, the chatbot value will be high quicker. But the humanoid real world AI stuff and the driving AI stuff, the value isn't there yet.
Yeah, for sure. I think just today, Jensen Huang was in Vietnam and was shaking hands with the government and saying that they're going to, partner and invest together.
So that's the long term. That's where you get your crazy numbers. You end up with a $300 trillion market cap, maybe a $500 trillion market cap. You mentioned competition before.
Yeah.
So I get, this is one I get a lot. This is the I call him Barry Black, but the Gary Black. Tesla's not going to be able to solve autonomy, and if they do, everybody else will solve it 6 months later. Just like as we know, Thunderfoot said that Tesla's not going to be able to economically land orbital rocket boosters and reuse them, and now they have started reusing them. I think they've had the 350th reused booster flight just the other day from Elon.
Crazy.
And the competition, like everybody started 6 months later. Except we are in 2 weeks, in 15 days, we will have the 9th anniversary of the first Falcon 9 orbital rocket booster landing. Successful launch of a payload into orbit, bring the booster back and land it. We are almost 9 years from that moment, and no one else has even tried to propulsively land an orbital rocket booster. I think that Blue Origin's going to give it a shot this year. I think Firefly and Rocket Lab may give it a try this year. But SpaceX didn't stop innovating, so Starship is going to blow everybody else out of the water. So the same thing with FSD and Robotaxi and Optimus. In order to make real world AI succeed, you need a massive amount of data and you need a massive amount of compute. Tesla has a massive amount of data being generated by something like 7 or 8 million existing four-wheel robots that are out in the world right now, collecting data, identifying problems, uploading the data relevant to the problems to the training compute. We've got a massive training compute cluster already in Palo Alto. We've got a new massive, even more impressive training compute cluster in Texas. I'm sure there's more coming. Massive data, massive compute. And I have this conversation a lot. I have this conversation in Bangkok with people. Well, where's the competition? Who else has the data? Who else is generating data at this scale? The answer is no one. Who else has compute at this scale? The answer is no one. There are some Chinese companies that are working on these things, but I don't think anybody has the fleet size, and I don't think anybody has the compute. And I think for Chinese companies in particular, I don't think they can get NVIDIA H100s and B200s at scale. So they are getting some kind of AI hardware. They're making some kind of AI hardware, but it's not really competitive. So the compute, it's really challenging for China to get the compute to compete at scale with Tesla on real world AI. It's not as challenging for them to get the data, but they haven't done it yet. I predict that, like, people talk about when is somebody going to license FSD, which is another line of revenue for Tesla, right? My best guess is that it will be BYD or another Chinese EV company. BYD already partners with Tesla in supplying them with batteries. So I think BYD is probably, in my opinion, likely to be the first company to adopt FSD and license FSD from Tesla. If somebody does, it should be BYD, and they will be able to innovate quicker than a US automaker and get it working on their cars within a year, maybe even 6 months. So I just went to the Bangkok Auto Show. That's a video I'm going to be publishing shortly. I'm very impressed with Chinese EV makers. I think they're struggling to make money, and they have some other issues, but they're putting out a huge volume, a huge variety of cars. I saw electric pickups, electric vans. I went into BYD has a fully electric bus. This I just got to mention this because this was crazy. A fully electric bus. I think it's about 30 seats, and it was 8 million baht, which is like $250,000. And the thing was, I think the range was limited. I think it could use more range. It was like 250 kilometers range, which real world is probably 200 kilometers or 120 miles for everybody else. But if it's a city bus, if it's doing local trips,
yeah,
that was pretty cool. It wasn't like crappy city bus. It was like a luxury bus, $250,000. I think BYD is super innovative, and I think Chang'an Motors, Geely Motors, they're doing some great stuff in China. Xpeng, these companies are innovating. They're doing some amazing. They're not as good as Tesla. I'm Tesla nerd. We always need to be less wrong, but t-shirts at elonbits.com. But I do think that they are really doing well, and they're much better than American automakers and European automakers. Sorry, that was a tangent. I went off.
That's so we're talking competition, and I agreed with a lot of things you're saying. I mean, it's
same thing with Optimus. Let me just hit Optimus for that point, though, on competition.
Okay. Yep.
There are other companies that are developing humanoid robots. Will they be able to does any of them have a compute cluster? I don't think so. I think Figure might be partnering with Open. They might partner with somebody else, but
it's NVIDIA's platform that's got 12 robot companies, and they're positioning themselves as the everybody shares, so that they get as big as they can get.
You've got to be consistent in your data collection. You've got to have a great AI team. I think that part might be okay, but then you also have to have the manufacturing chops to manufacture these bots at scale. And if Xiaomi, which is a cell phone electronics maker, decided to do it, maybe. But I think these startups, what's your plan for manufacturing? I don't see how most of these startups are going to manufacture at scale. And fundamentally, I think they might be closer to Optimus than they are to Robotaxi, right? But still, Tesla has this amazing lead in and there's a next step we didn't talk about, right? Which is you're training the bot to do tasks. You're training the bot to navigate space. There's this moment that's coming, and it might be 2 years away, when you develop artificial general intelligence. And once you develop artificial general intelligence, it isn't necessarily training a bot to do a task. If you have artificial general intelligence, you can tell the bot, go do this, that it's never been trained to do, and it has artificial just like you and I, you can tell us to do something. We might not do it well, but we can try to figure it out on the spot. And maybe we watch a YouTube video and we figure out how to do it better, and maybe Optimus is able to download a module and learn how to do it better. And I think we're not very far from that world. And if you get to AGI first and you continue innovating and you continue building out your training compute, I think you get a lead. And I think it's hard to beat the lead.
Well, that's actually the argument that other people can say. So if OpenAI gets to AGI, then you can take that and apply it to the bot, and it's no longer required all those vision and data and all that training. You don't need it. It's just another way around, maybe, right? These things
I think that there's a problem with what do we mean by AGI? Yeah. So if we mean that you can ask it a chat question and show it a picture or show it a video clip and ask it questions about it and get answers or get pictures or get videos, that is a form of AGI. That is smarter than any human can do. But real world AI is different. Real world is you have to interact with objects, like even like Optimus versus Robotaxi. Robotaxi does not manipulate objects. FSD navigates space.
Jensen Huang was just interviewed a week ago, and I did a show on that where he basically said it's like if you can ask an LLM to create a video of Jensen Huang pouring a glass of water into a cup, it's the same thing. It's just tokens, he said. It's the same thing. I can then take that and to get a robot of Jensen Huang to pour the thing. Well, that's what he said.
I think that he knows more than I do.
He knows all of it,
We can all agree that Jensen Huang is smarter than I am and knows more about this than I do. I have not seen any real world demonstrations of a AI trained on chat and an AI stuck in a cloud.
Elon says the opposite. Yeah, Elon has been saying that the only way to get real world physics, you can't teach physics, is to interact with the world. And when you're pouring water into a cup, your bot can look into the cup, and there's no video of what are you pouring the water correctly into the cup. He had said that as well. So
I would say this: what drives AI learning is feedback.
Yeah,
and we talk about reinforcement learning, human feedback, but when you get to real world, you can actually get real world feedback, right? So the car is driving and the car is constantly measuring what it's seeing in the real world. It is making predictions and it's seeing when its predictions are wrong. And then it uploads that, and that allows them to update the training compute, send different training down to the chips. I think that I don't want to say it's impossible. And I actually have this theory that right now, somewhere in probably Mississippi, Mississippi, there's a 16-year-old in his basement on his Windows laptop who's come up with a new algorithm for machine learning, right? And he's going to be the world's second trillionaire.
Yes.
After Elon.
Likely.
If things work out right, Elon finds out about him before everybody else. Elon gives the guy like $50 billion to buy the tech and deploys it. But if Zuckerberg finds him first, we're screwed. If Sam Altman finds him first. But my bet is that Elon is watching for those guys as much as anyone else, and he finds that guy and brings him on board. But I think that one of the challenges with AI, and I think Jan LeCun is kind of a clown lately, Jan the Clown, but I think Jan LeCun has a pretty good point that the algorithms we're using now have some limitations, and it's hard for them to learn certain things. But that just means we're waiting for the next algorithm. And somewhere, like I said, somewhere there's a teenager in his basement, in his mom's basement, of course, who's hacking away on some crappy laptop that's 5 years old, and he's come up with a new algorithm, and it learns much better on much less data on much less compute. And we may find that out next year. And that changes everything, because if you develop AI that learns on less data with less compute, that changes everything, right? The size of your compute cluster doesn't matter anymore, or as much. So that's a competitive threat that's hard to gauge. I think the biggest threat to what I described is not competition. The biggest threat to what I described is governments, plural. Might be the Chinese government, might be the US government, might be the California state government, might be European governments. And when I say threat, I don't mean threat to Tesla shareholders. I mean threat to a world where AI starts creating an age of abundance, and governments fear that these AIs will be more powerful than them, that these AIs will deliver benefits that they don't deliver to their constituents, and they get jealous. And special interests don't want it. There's going to be so many pressures on government to stop this technological change. Just really quick, if you remember the early days of Uber, there were cities and states that resisted Uber. To fight them. Yep. And it was fairly early on, the evidence came in that Ubers reduced drunk driving deaths.
Yeah.
And it was like, that should have been it. It reduces drunk. And I remember my city, I lived in Albany, New York. I lived outside of Albany, New York, but I spent a lot of time in Albany, New York. Albany, New York had this massive crackdown on drunk drivers. And they also had some special Friday event down by the river. And they would advertise free parking and alcohol vendors. Yeah. Like, they're advertising free parking and we're serving alcohol while saying we're cracking down on drunk driving. And, Key West, I don't know if Key West has legalized Uber yet. I know Key West is one of the places that was resisting Uber. It's like, you have a lot of alcohol flowing in Key West. Yeah. You have a lot of drunks. you have a drunk driving problem. Why wouldn't you want Uber?
Yeah.
And it's because governments, there are people who have this pie in the sky thinking that government is the good guys and government's trying to make life better for everybody. It's like, no, government is about power. Government is about
at the time, taxi was the one that was fighting him, and they paid off. Okay, so competition wise, I think that you had 100 million bots for Tesla to do, and I think doesn't matter to me if all these Chinese are able to mass produce these bots, they're able to get the same AI, and they're able to compete. 100 million per year or 100 million total for Tesla. That's very doable. That's very doable.
So what I'm saying is with bot, I'm saying they're manufacturing 100 million bots a year, and that sounds like a lot.
It's not,
there's 8 billion people on the planet. So if you were trying to replace, let's say you had 5 billion workers. Yeah. Right? If you're trying to replace 5 billion workers, it takes 50 years to make enough bots.
Elon already said so. Like, he's already calculated in his head how, compared to the car manufacturer, how many replacements you'll need, and that's all doable, and that's with competition.
And if you see the future that Elon sees, then I think you and I see of a base on the moon and a colony on Mars. Who's building the colony? Optimus is building the colony.
That alone will need 100 million bots every planet, minimum. This is fun. Okay, so far, I think the only thing I would say about what I've seen is that you do paint a picture of napkin math, and then you say this is what the long term is. And then the difference between long term and 2032, and the way you answered it was by 2032, stockholders are looking forward, and then they'll bring that back. And that's really the only complaint I have would be, okay, well, that doesn't tell me that by 2032, the stock will be 300x at that point. It just means that possibility of 300x is there, just I don't know when, right?
Yeah, I think that, and then there's another criticism that I hear a lot is, hey, Warren, the global market cap is 100 trillion, or the world GDP is 100 trillion. Yeah. So that criticism is not first principles thinking.
It's not. I get it.
What was global market cap 20 years ago? What was global GDP 20 years ago? And then when you say global market cap, are you including private companies? No. Are you including residential real estate? No. Are you including, when you take the global asset value, right? The global asset value is much, much higher than 100 trillion. It's probably 500 trillion, maybe a quadrillion. And if you just drive down the coast of California and try to count the number of $10 million houses, drive down the coast of Florida, and there's a lot of coastline in Florida and California, and try to count the number of $10 million houses, and it's so many, you lose track. You can't. It's uncountable, and that's just 2 states. So and that 2 states in one country. So the total value of assets is one thing, but plain and simple, we're talking about technologies that are massively increasing the productivity of labor and the productivity of economies. So GDP is going to grow and global market caps are going to grow. And there will be companies that are supplying Tesla that are going to grow. There will be companies that develop I have this whole view of we have these technological waves. Yeah, and you have the big company that's creating the wave, Google and Google search and search engine optimization, Facebook and
Microsoft first,
social media, and then social media marketing. And there's all these businesses that spin off of this stuff. Yeah, Microsoft, and then you've got Microsoft, you've got Excel, and you've got Lotus 1, 2, 3, and you've got all this software that builds off it. So what kind of companies will develop to ride the wave of robotaxi? I remember Omar, when I interviewed Omar a few years ago, Omar was saying, imagine a Cybertruck with a pizza oven. Right. And you order a pizza and the Cybertruck drives up with the pizza oven, and Optimus, I don't think we had Optimus in our heads at the time, but Optimus slides the pizza out and serves it at your door, and it just came out of the oven. Right. And then, that's just one of a potentially infinite number of services that could be delivered in a robotaxi world. And then companies that buy a fleet of bots and they deploy them in a herd of bots to do tasks. There's so many ways that it's hard to wrap your head around how much growth we're going to see in the global economy as a result of these technologies, which massively increase the productivity of labor and the productivity of capital.
Yeah. So I agree with all that.
Some people think I'm optimistic sometimes, but I just think, again, that's just sort of very straightforward. Doesn't this increase the productivity of labor, and doesn't this increase the productivity?
Well, again, the 300x thing is long term, and then the part I would ask us to think about is that by the time you get to 100x, the world has changed. And when you get there, maybe nobody's going to pay the 20,000 to 50,000. You don't need to pay that much money anymore. You know, what Elon was saying about economy just totally just collapses in the sense that what do you need to pay anything for anymore? What does money mean? That's what he was saying at that point, right?
I'm ambivalent on that point. You know, at a certain point, if you start, I think it's really hard to picture that world. I don't think it has to be everything is free and everybody flaps their arms and dances in the fields, right? I don't think it necessarily tracks that way. If it does track that way, then who cares? We're all living happily and we're all living in an age of abundance and it doesn't matter how much money we have, right? But, you know, there's a certain amount of real estate in the world. And no matter how many bots you have, you're not going to be increasing the amount of real estate. I suppose you can make artificial islands, right?
I don't think it matters where you live at that point.
Maybe we're going to create floating cities, but the reality is that there will still be more valuable real estate and less valuable real estate, and there's a lot to do. There's a lot of time to create the abundance that we're talking about, and I don't think the economic structure that we live in advantage. This is like I love Elon. Never bet against Elon. I'm not sure I agree with him that the meaning of economics completely changes. I think there's still value to human labor, and the bots increase the productivity of human labor.
Yeah. Xander asked me, he goes, what is your strategy for dealing with this disruption that's going to happen with robots? It's going to take all of our jobs. It's going to change society tremendously. What's your strategy? And my answer is, if you think the bots are going to take over, then you better invest in the bots. That's the only way. But except that maybe somebody will say, well, who cares about your money? Well, I still believe that if I have enough money, that I'm a little bit less concerned about being disrupted myself.
You want to fly in a private jet from Los Angeles to the Philippines, right? It's still going to cost something, right? If you want to have your own personal jet to fly you from, Los Angeles to New York, that's probably not going to be free. There's going to be marginal cost to that, and you're going to have to pay the marginal cost for that. And we may end up in a world where we're all flying around in flying cars that go 600 miles an hour in the air, just sort of the speed of sound, or maybe faster than the speed of sound. Maybe all that happens, but I think that day is quite a long ways away.
It's fun. Okay, well, it looks like that both robotaxi and bots are no longer that far away. It is something that we can all see and dream about or plan for. It's coming. And listen, a year ago, in January of last year, I was doing these shows on bots. What did I hear? Oh, never in my lifetime. Oh, you're 10 years away. Oh, it's never going to happen. Can't you see? You're totally overestimating. 1 month later, in February, one bot company after another started showing that, oh my God, we can actually do autonomous tasks. Oh, look at how quickly we're building these bots. They can outwalk, and everybody just changed their mind all of a sudden. Oh yeah, we always knew that bots are real.
Think about this, just for the near-term future. We've seen the Generation 2 bot, and we've seen the Generation 3 hand. Yeah. We haven't seen the Generation 3 bot yet. Yeah. We know how much improved the Generation 3 hand is. Yeah. I'm guessing the rest of the Generation 3 bot is also radically improved. And that's the one they're going to start manufacturing in small scale for Tesla's own internal use soon. And there's another bot coming in about 18 months to 2 years.
That's going to be version 1 that's sold wide. So it's even going to be that much better. Yeah, the hand, I was talking to Scott Walter about it. The hand that they put in here, obviously it's going to go with the left hand and the right hand. But wouldn't they take the same concept and do it with your feet, right? Maybe even the head. I mean, like the shoulders maybe too. Like the whole idea of this, it's like basically copying a human, right? Where any part that you have tendons going through, why did humans evolve with tendons? And they've solved it.
We're going to see some stuff.
Yeah. This is fun. Okay, well, this is what Warren kept saying. It's napkin math. And he was pretty, I felt that you were pretty like, okay, you can be 2 years late. Oh, yes, you can change the number. You're pretty flexible that way. You're just trying to show the scale. So people attack you and say, 300x, that's crazy. 75x, that's crazy. You're going, well, you tell me what you think it is.
No one's going to cry. No one's going to cry if it's only 10x.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, that's it. There you go. People will be accepting that. Warren just said just 10x, 23rd too. That's great. But the point is, go through the exercise and, do what I just tried to do, is react to what he was saying. I agree with this. I don't agree with that. and then try to come up with your own number, because I think that this is a big deal. And you might say bots will never come. You can say autonomy is not coming. That's fair.
Yeah, and rockets will never land to be reused.
Well, I think the way my answer to that would be that, okay, I just learned this, which is something very interesting. If you apply a 0% chance to, let's say, autonomy or a robot, that is a leap that you're taking too. That's a massive assumption on the wrong side. So you don't have to say, I'm not saying it's 100% chance all this is going to happen, right? But you have to give it some percentage chance, because the potential, the market is so massive that even if 10% of it is right, it is material, like big time. So maybe what you do, and CERN has done this, he said, if my assumptions, you just take a 10% chance of what I just said, very conservative, but just take 10% of the robot and take 10% of the autonomy, you can do this too. So instead of 300x, it's 30x.
30x, yeah.
You know what I mean? Just do 10% chance. Yeah.
I really think it's go through my analysis.
Yeah.
Tell me what you think I've got wrong. How would you break it down differently? I think the other approach that I see a lot of people doing is they build up these huge spreadsheets with models for like a whole bunch of little details. My personal approach is I don't think the highly complex spreadsheets add that much value. I think they add value, and if you have that level of attention to detail, but you're creating so more. It's like kind of like degrees of freedom. You're creating so many more opportunities to be wrong about something, and you don't know which thing you're wrong about is material. So I struggle to see where the competition is meaningful. I think you're correct that there's more potential for competition in Optimus. And the future is bright. Let's have fun watching it.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Warren. Go check out his YouTube channel. He drops these. I'll tell you that you will watch his. He's got great thinking, great forecast that you won't see in any other channel. Go follow him on his X channel. Go subscribe to him on X and on YouTube. And you can see him on X at WR4 New York Government, New York GOV, because he had run for New York governor at one point in time. Thank you so much, Warren. Always enjoy this. Appreciate you. Bye-bye. I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.